right, and this is Politics by Jake, and we have a situation where, and you know what the idea of the fascist right and what Trump is, right? They rule with propaganda, they rule with arrogance, they rule with turbulence, continually keeping the population off balance. And I wanted to, and there's, you always hear me say this, there's so many things to talk about. But I did want to talk about this. A federal judge has temporarily blocked President Donald Trump from federalizing and deploying. This is always going to happen at the trial level. It's in the corrupt, controlled Supreme Court, that corrupt organization, that these things get changed. But we'll see how they change this if they're willing to go this far to do it. As I said, a federal judge has temporarily blocked Trump from federalizing and deploying Oregon National Guard troops to Portland following a challenge from the state and city of Portland. And this is Judge Karen Immergut of the U.S. District Court in Portland. She's granted the city and the Oregon Department of Justice a temporary restraining order Saturday afternoon, stopping for now Trump and Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth plan to deploy 200 Oregon Guard troops to Portland to guard federal buildings. This is actually okay. Actually, it's an exception to posse comitatus. The order expires October 18th. Wait, there's more. The order expires October 18th. The parties will discuss October 17th, whether the order should be extended for another 2 weeks. Federal lawyers have to October 17th to argue for a preliminary injunction to block the temporary restraining order. And in her 30-page opinion, Immergut issued a powerful rebuke of Trump's perception of his executive power, which can be succinctly stated. In fact, he almost says these in these very words. Article 2 says, I can do whatever I want. The man king, the boy child, the poor little rich boy can do whatever he wants. So Immergut's opinion was a rebuke to this proscriptive and sweeping perception of his executive power, which I just, and this is basically what he says to it. And there may be a word out of place here or there, but that's what he says. That's what he thinks. And found that he violated the 10th Amendment of the United States Constitution, which guarantees police power within the states resides with the states. Immergut said protests in Portland were not by any definition a rebellion, nor do they pose the danger of rebellion. It's the Hitlerian, the fascist, big lie. What did Hitler say to Goebbels? Tell them lies. The bigger, the better. Sooner or later, something is bound to stick. This is one of the tools. This is one of the weapons of this regime, this illegal regime, I might say, pursuant to 14th Amendment, Section 3, the big lie. Immergut wrote, furthermore, this country has a long-standing and foundational tradition of resistance to government overreach, especially in the form of military intrusion into civil affairs. This historical, she continues, tradition boils down to a simple proposition. This is a nation of constitutional law, not martial law. Trump and Hegseth hate that. They hate that. And their ilk, the people who hold their coats, the Carolyn Lovett or Leavitt Levitts, the Pam Blondies, the corrupt Attorney General of the state of Florida, now the corrupt Attorney General of the United States of America, they hate this, and the others, and Stephen Miller, and I'm going to try to talk about what he's got himself into. He's just setting the stage for litigation after he's out of office. Defendants have made a range of arguments, she continues, that if accepted, risk blurring the line between civil and military federal power to the detriment of this nation. Some of the civic officials weigh in. Attorney General Dan Rayfield said today's ruling of the state of Oregon, ruling halts what appears to be the president's attempt to normalize the United States military in our cities. Mobilizing the United States military in our cities is not normal, and it should not be normal. and we will fight to make sure that it is never normal. I've said from the very beginning, and this is Mayor Keith Wilson, by the way, the number of federal troops that are needed or wanted is 0. There is no insurrection in Portland, no threat to national security, no fires, no bombs, no fatalities due to civil unrest. The only threat we face is to our democracy, and it is being led by President Donald Trump. Senator Ron Wyden, who is a Democrat, said, "I will keep working with the local and state officials to ensure Trump does not keep wasting millions of taxpayer dollars to make Portland the center of his perverse," and it is perverse, fantasy about conducting assaults on United States cities. Trump at a Tuesday speech with military leaders, and this is an embarrassment. We're going to talk about this some more. Boy, I wish I had more time. The show's only started, and I'm lamenting that. Trump said we should use some of those dangerous cities as training grounds for the U.S. military. He described Portland is like World War II, he said it was. Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois said Trump had notified him that he would soon federalize 300 National Guard troops in Illinois to guard federal property in Chicago. This, on its face, is legitimate. If it were needed, this can be an exception to posse comitatus, which means no federal troops against American citizens. Trump has claimed in posts on his social media site Truth Social that ICE Gestapo processing facility south of downtown Portland is under attack by anti-fascists and domestic terrorists. This is not true. The article says they've been mostly peaceful. But that's the thing. You have to remain peaceful. You have to remain peaceful. I talked about how when the East German government was falling and the protesters came out, the last ploy that communism had was to incite the public to violence so that they could have a justification for putting the protests down and literally saving the government, the communist government of East Germany. But there was no violence. They were completely peaceful. And that is what must happen here. No provocateurs, no bad actors. Peace in the face of the desire to provoke to violence. Representative Maxine Dexter of Oregon's 3rd Congressional District says it's absolutely antithetical to your First Amendment rights. And we know that the administration is not encouraging restraint at this moment, so please continue to stay away from the ICE facility. Okay, so we have that going on. And let's take a break right now, and we will have much more of Politics by Jake in just a second. We'll be right back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. This is Jake, here to tell you the world is on fire, only you're not being told who actually lit the match. Politics by Jake, Mondays and Fridays at 7 a.m. on KCAA. Okay, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And as I said, there's so much going on, it's just an amazing amount. I really haven't even started the show yet the way I wanted to, because I need to get these in and talk about these. Stephen Miller has been accused, who just I'm sorry to say, he's just a hateful, spiteful little man. He's been accused of incitement to violence against judges with new purge comments. He said he's been accused of making his subordinates cry at work. Well, I guess we've all had bosses like that. but he took to social media over the weekend to make several proclamations related to quote-unquote leftist judges. The Democrat Party, and they use this. The name of the party, we have, I guess we have Rush Limbaugh to thank for this, and the ditto heads who thoughtlessly listen to him, because there's no political education in the United States. So that when Rush Limbaugh says it's the Democrat Party, it's not the Democrat Party. It's not the Democrat Party any more than the Republican Party is the Republic Party. Or more pejoratively, as I might call them, the rebukes. It's not. It's the Republican Party. It's the Democratic Party. Miller knows what he's saying, and he's doing this to be pejorative and to be pointed, and it's rube bait for the suckers and the credulous who don't know these things. So anyway, he says the Democrat Party has filled our legal and judicial system with radicals who protect left-wing terrorists. This is all rube bait. This is a very real and a dire crisis for our Republican form of government. We don't have a republic. We have a democratic republic. It's a hybrid. So he doesn't know that either, but he does know that. Miller accused judges of shielding terrorism. The issue before is, do you understand how turbulent this is? How calculated it is to spread fear, fear of the other, fear of the immigrant, fear of the anti-fascist, which, actually, when you think about it, being afraid of anti-fascism is kind of ridiculous. But do you understand? Do you understand the way these fascists work? And he is a fascist. It is well organized, he goes on to say, and funded. It is shielded by far left Democrat judges, let's say Democrat judges, prosecutors, and attorneys general. And then he said the only remedy is to use legitimate state power to dismantle terrorism and terror networks. And this is just a fantasy, as we talked about in the Immergut opinion with regard to Portland, Oregon. There are no rebellions going on. Federal property is safe. This is all indicative of an administration that fears the people. And they know how unpopular they are. Trump is underwater, 37%, something like that. And I could go through some of the other things, and I was going to go through these things on the other show, but I have not done it, and I apologize for that. But there's just so much going on. But he's underwater. Basically, everybody hates him, except this loyal cadre of Republicans and those who owe their largesse and their entitlement and their prestige and their position to him. So a journalist, Jim Stewartson, said Stephen Miller is going to execute a purge of the Democratic Party and justice system based on his illegal, unconstitutional memo, NSPM-7. He has collapsed Democrats, far-left Democrat judges, and Antifa into a single domestic terror threat as a pretext for mass arrests. This is a melange. This is like when you take different fruits and melon and different kinds of melon. You have Tuscan melon, you have, musk melon, which is cantaloupe, and then you have honeydew, and you have other kinds of melon, and you put them all together. That's a melange. And the language is irrational, and he means it to be. He escalates the harsh and conspiratorial rhetoric yet again, suggesting that federal judges, prosecutors, and state attorneys are actually somehow aiding and abetting in a shadowy network of leftist domestic terrorist groups. This is absurd. It's ridiculous. So, here we are. It's Tuesday at 1 p.m. in the afternoon, and as you're listening to this, and we're in the middle of a government shutdown, and we're going to refer to this in the only accurate scientific way. This is a Trump shutdown. It is the handiwork of the Trump regime with all its, and I said this before, all its flamboyance, all its unstable ideologues, two of which I just enumerated for you and talked about what they have most recently said, with all its malevolent technocracy and technocrats with all of its other hangers-on, adventurers, coat holders, and in many cases, criminal reprobates. And that's what you've got now. And this is going to be Trump's second government shutdown. You may not have known this. The first one was in his first term. That one was 35 days. And that's where we are now. And what we've got to go through, of course, it only seems like 1 week melts into the next. The way this goes, the whole question of time is going to be worthy of maybe a broadcast at some point. But we are now here in the midst of this shutdown, and we've got to remember there have been big international events. And we've had, just in the last week or two, Trump's appearance at the United Nations. It was a raving speech, an absolutely unstable, anecdote-filled, apparently attempted to be folksy, but there he was at the United States Nations General Assembly, embarrassing himself in front of the nations, embarrassing the United States, certainly, providing a humiliation and a disgrace for what has been a great country and still can be again, but not under the current management, it's not. So we've had that, and we had the speech given by Trump at his press conference with Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, and we've had Trump's Quantico speech, the infamous Quantico speech. It was a production where J.D. Vance opened for him and gave a similarly raving speech, I might add, of his own, full of very negative strategic portent. And then Trump went on for an hour and 11 minutes. And it's a collection of his clinical specimens, I guess. It's a parade of his anecdotes and, above all, his myths. Because what we're witnessing is a colossal exercise in mythography. It's lies. And I think a lot of you can see that, this is what's going on with Trump. And we can say, hey, MAGA, how you doing with the myths of your leader? And, of course, the chances are they're going to have to go along with him, of course. Otherwise, they get fired, as he pointed out to the, 800 generals in that auditorium. So, we've got all this happening. And one of the very disturbing byproducts of this busy week is that now passed, is like John Oliver last week tonight, is the question of mental decline, of mental declining capacity, increasing questions about the fitness for the presidency and whether, after all, perhaps it's not time to begin agitating around the question of the 25th Amendment. So we have 25th Amendment, the president can be removed for incapacity. So this is a pretty total crisis. I wanted to start off the show saying these things, but I just had to get these other things in because so often I run out of time. But it's virtually a total crisis. All of the main systems of government and civilization in the world, and it's going to require some effort to get out of this, but I'm convinced that the way out is clear, and I'm going to tell you what it is. It starts right now with defeating Trump, Vance, Hegseth, and the other clown show in his cabinet, like Blondie, like Miller, like the ideologues like Bannon, the MAGA Republicans, the Thunes, and the MAGA Mikes. And they must be defeated. And they must be defeated in this budget showdown. This is going to be a royal road to reducing the power of this regime. And there's much to be said about this shutdown. But the idea is, especially, you people who were claiming, back in March that, they wanted to have the government shut down. I think Schumer was, very right not to do it. The reason why I think it's essential to do it now is that it had been essential to go to a test of strength with Republicans, because that's what it is. And the Republicans would not negotiate with Schumer and Jeffries. And the reason they wouldn't is because they're in thrall to Donald Trump. And this is just for Donald Trump. This is just what he wants. Donald Trump is this injured boy, this poor little rich boy who's never been loved, who knows he was never loved, and it's taking it out on the entire country and the world, arguably. Look, USAID, defunct, gone. Voice of America, it's been going since 1942, all but gone. And these Republicans, these rebukes, as we really should call them. They call us Democrat. When it's the Democratic Party, I think it's totally appropriate for us to call them rebukes. They control everything. So we have to decide if this is the kind of government, and we have to realize that right now they control everything, and look at what they're doing with it. And we have to decide if this is the government that we want, where one man controls everything like an autocrat, like a Tsar Alexander of Russia, and what happened to him. Do you want the dictator? Do you want an autocrat? So resistance is important. And this is Politics by Jake, and we'll be back after these messages. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Hi, this is Jake with Politics by Jake. Do you like what you hear right now? Support the real talk then. Go to patreon.com/Politics by Jake right now. Every dollar helps fight the noise. And this is Politics by Jake, and we're back. And, I didn't get to finish what I wanted to say on this. The reason why you have to stand up, and you have to stand up, this is crisis time. The thing that I have been talking about since now 2015 anyway, is this fascist takeover. And I understand the ordinary run-of-the-mill person isn't thinking about this, doesn't really know what fascism is except for Hitler, and maybe some people know Mussolini. And when they hear me talk about this, and others like me, other media voices that are out there, they say, isn't this a little much? I mean, they're Republicans, right? They're No, they're not conservatives. They're something entirely different. That's one of the things that I'm trying to tell you. And they have to be defeated. I mean, look, the Republicans control Washington, D.C. right now, okay? They have a monopoly, basically, on power. They hold the legislative branch, the bicameral, that means the two houses, the House of Representatives and the Senate. They hold the executive branch, and they hold the judicial branch. And even though they're trying to install MAGA judges as quickly as they can, at the trial level and at the initial appeals level, they tend not to do well, because these judges take an oath to the Constitution and they are more or less serious about it. And they tend to interpret things correctly. It's when you get up to the Supreme Court, which, by the way, as we go to air, their new session is going to be starting like on Monday or Tuesday. Sorry, it's going to be starting soon. They do start on the first Tuesday in October. And in fact, there is even a movie with Walter Matthau in it as one of the Supreme Court justices called First Tuesday in October. So, and accordingly, their fall session begins on October 6th, which is, this coming Tuesday, and you're listening to the show right now. And that marks the start of the October term. And oral arguments are scheduled throughout October and November. Key cases set for hearing during this period. And there are several cases that are going to be heard on Trump's power. This is where the law changes, because you have a 6-3 reactionary. That's the best that can be said about them, that they're reactionary, that they're backwards. Fascist is very close to actually what they are. And this was the whole idea. You've heard me talk about this court before. You've heard me talk about Clarence Thomas. You've heard me talk about Samuel Alito. You've heard me talk about John Roberts, who was selected, and this is interesting, not as an associate justice, but as the Chief Justice. And he was making more than $700,000 a year as a partner at the law firm of Hogan and Hartman. He specialized in appellate law, argued 39 cases before the Supreme Court. He has a net worth of $17 million, maybe as high as $25 million. And it's basically accumulated largely through this successful legal career. So he's doing quite well. His annual salary with the Supreme Court is $277,000 or thereabout. One wonders why it is that he is on the court and how it is that his net worth is so high. And the others, of course, you have Neil Gorsuch, and I could talk about him, Brent Kavanaugh, who likes to have a beer, and Amy Coney Barrett. Amy Coney Barrett is a member of an organization called the People of Praise. And you have heard me say that Barrett is, I'm sorry to say it, but she's kind of a religious fanatic. She's a member of a Catholic sect called the People of Praise. It's an ad hoc, it's kind of a layperson organization. It's kind of like Opus Dei. It's not like the Franciscans, who got a dispensation from the Pope way back when. As I said, it's kind of an ad hoc organization. So you hear me say she's a fanatic. She's definitely reactionary, which you're going to hear from me in a moment. Remember, people who are reactionary, they believe in backwards things. She believes that the Bible ought to be preferred over the Constitution when deciding cases, you know, even though nobody can agree on what it is that the Bible actually means after 2,000 years or however many years that by the writings were actually began to be collected around the time of Constantine. That was around 300 AD, and they began to be organized. So these are the members of that court, and I spoke earlier about Karen Immergut's decision, which was a really good decision, but you have to remember, she's at the trial level. She's at the lowest level of general jurisdiction of the district courts. There are appeals that will be filed, and Trump and his legal team are nothing if not just incredibly litigative. They appeal everything whenever they can, regardless. And that, you know, points out a basic inequity with the court system. The person who's the maddest and who has the most money to spend usually is the one who winds up with justice. But at the lower levels, basically the judges are okay, even the ones that were reported by Republicans. But as I was saying, and before I branched off on this, the Republicans control Washington, D.C. If you don't like what's happening, if you don't like what you're hearing, what I'm talking to you about Stephen Miller and all of the other gang of pals in that cabal, you need to break the Republic monopoly. You need to break their monopoly. They have a stranglehold on power. You have to break it. And the place where it can be broken, and really where it needs to be broken, otherwise there are going to be devastating effects upon the populace because people are going to lose their health insurance. I mean, and the hypocrisy of the maggots. Many of the senators and the House representatives are from what I call taker states, which is states that do not contribute as much to the federal government monetarily as they get back from the federal government. And I talked about that on the show a couple of shows ago. I didn't get into all of it, but there's about half of them that are like that. You have Mike Johnson, MAGA Mike Johnson. And this shows the ilk of the kind of people you're dealing with, because when I make these sweeping statements, and I know that some of you guys, you say, come on, Jake, you know, they're just people, you're just going too far with this fascist stuff. Stop watching The Big Lebowski. Big Lebowski is a favorite movie of mine, but it is a favorite movie of a lot of people. Jeff Bridges is the main protagonist in it, a couple of other fine actors in it. And Jeff Bridges plays a hippie named Lebowski, and he is kind of stuck in the 60s. Julianne Moore is in it. She's a fine actress. And he talks about fascism a lot. He calls people fascists a lot. And he's a stoner. And you might easily say, Jake, you got to stop watching The Big Lebowski. But I'm telling you, this is what it is. This is not a movie. This is what is going on. And it's for real. And it is not for nothing that cognoscenti of the 60s used this term and called these people fascists. Now it has become a kind of a joke. Now it has become kind of a hiss and a byword for those people who are accused of being it. But that's one reason for Politics by Jake, because we explain these things to you and how that they really have meaning. And these are the kinds of people that you have, and you can't really, and as I said, this is going to be one of those sweeping statements. You can't really negotiate with them. I recall the Republicans, how they loved Bill Clinton. Why did they love Bill Clinton? Bill Clinton destroyed welfare. And welfare, whatever else you could say about it, it was kind of a guaranteed income. And guaranteed income programs have really done well in other parts of the world. But it was the price of his presidency. He was willing to do it. And forever after, you would have Republicans who'd say, oh, for the days of someone like Bill Clinton, someone we could work with. Well, he didn't really get anything for it. I mean, I guess you could argue that he got to be president. But he sacrificed it. He sacrificed millions of people who needed these programs. You have the same kind of, you can't negotiate with people who are like that and who think that the way that you are acceptable for them is for you to give up everything and for them to do nothing. You have Mike Johnson, for example, Speaker of the House right now. He's from this district. I don't know if he's exactly from there, but his district is Shreveport. It might be Monroe. I'm just talking off the top of my head here. I'll look it up. It's in Louisiana. He's from Louisiana, and the area where he comes from has one of the largest populations that is dependent per capita, on Medicaid and similar things, and probably food stamps too. So, I mean, this is a guy who's attacking and trying to destroy and demean and impoverish his own constituents. And for what? In the service of Trump, who seems to be blind to all other considerations except flattery. Nothing else really seems to mean anything to him. So there are those things. And at this point, I think we should probably take a break and have some nice messages, and then we'll be back. And this is Politics by Jake. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Let's be blunt, shall we? America is litigious. It's unstable, and it's financially weaponized. If your name is on everything you own, you're a sitting duck. At Twain Consulting, we help you vanish legally, ethically, and permanently. From land trusts to layered LLCs, we teach you how to restructure your assets so the predators can't see them and can't touch them. This isn't a loophole. It's a strategy that the wealthy have used for decades. Isn't it time you got the same protection? Call Twain Consulting at 805-380-5699 or visit us online. Protect what's yours before someone else claims it. And now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. Hi, this is Jake with Politics by Jake to tell you you're not crazy. The system is rigged. Help us say it louder, won't you? Join us at patreon.com/Politics by Jake. Okay, and this is Politics by Jake, and we are back. And I, I'm backed up with stuff. Some people are backed up another way. I'm backed up with material, and I want to get this out. Just like most times when you're backed up, you want to get something out. And I want to talk about what we've been through. And I did do a little of this in the last couple of shows, but I think that I have enough time to get through everything that I've got prepared on this. So actually, the beginning of the Trump regime was a time of, like being, as the saying goes, on a darkling plain, haunted by confused alarms, where ignorant political forces clash day and night. So Musk, as you recall, and the Doge came out of nowhere with these monstrous figures, big balls. And, of course, remember, those were wrecking balls in his case. So during February and March and into April, really all the way to May 28th, Musk was running wild in Washington with these anti-government libertarian tech freaks. You probably saw videos of some of them standing with a menacing looking look on their face in front of the doors. People of very scant understanding of human society and anything of the sort, but going wild. Because anyone with any understanding at all would never have done this. Either that or they have an ulterior motive. And, I say there are both alternatives existing at the same time in Doge. So like in quantum physics, life can be a particle and a wave. Of course, in quantum physics, it's different because light can be two things until it's observed, and then it becomes one thing. It can become a particle or a wave. But before that, it exists in this, quantum state. Hence the word quantum mechanics and quantum physics. So in this particular case, it trumps quantum physics, you'll pardon the expression, because both of these motives are existing: stupidity, lack of understanding, and the ulterior motive. And there were the mass firings, as you recall, approximately, just astonishing. And I want you to never forget, and I want you to remember, because you have to remember, if you like this kind of government, then great. If you don't, then the thing to do is to defeat the stranglehold that MAGA and Trump have on the government. Defeat it right now. Defeat it in this budget situation that has caused this shutdown. So 300,000 federal workers driven out one way or another, crippling the government. And now, only now, are we being able to restore some of those cuts? Of course, there was a resistance right away on the 5th of February, 15 days or thereabouts after 2 weeks, after inauguration. We've got the emergence of the 5501. And that's 50 demonstrations in 50 states on this one day. And I say this stuff to repudiate those people who say nobody's standing up. I'm standing up. I'm here on Mondays and Fridays. Well, it's actually now Tuesdays and Saturdays on KCAA. And there are others like me who are standing up. But there's lots of people standing up. I've said that the United States, if it's going to be saved from fascism, the civic society, which is the strongest civic society in the world, the strongest anti-fascist civic society in the world, is going to have to do it because the maggots have gotten control of the government. So 50 demonstrations in 50 states on one day. They led off with the Not My President, and you remember these, Not My President demonstrations on the 17th of February, and even earlier the, what can we say, the more militant maybe aspect of this comes to the fore with the anti-Tesla demonstrations. Not all of them are evangelism, A lot of them are peaceful protests at Tesla dealers. Remember that? To try to hit Doge, to try to hit Musk in the Labanza, which for him is money. So, Not My President. And this goes on the whole time. So Doge is running wild. And Washington, this was a time, to me, this was a time when the people in Washington were terrified. And you shouldn't be terrified. You should never be terrified. You should follow what Franklin Delano Roosevelt said. The only thing we have to fear is fear itself. But, sometimes it happens. I mean, and in this case, it was if you go to work in the morning, will you be given your walking papers? And what happened? And of course, this was a time when we were told that the big balls and the rest of this cabal of lunatics were going to be delving into the secret personnel records of the American people, from the Social Security Administration, from the U.S. Treasury, the Internal Revenue Service, and so on. And Musk was even clashing with Besant at Treasury. Important organizing in this period was done by Senator Murphy. You've heard me talk about him, Senator Murphy of Connecticut. He did a memorable demonstration at the U.S. Treasury, which was in some ways the center of it. And also there were protests against OMB, that's Office of Management and Budget, and its leader, the infamous vote character. And January 27th, in the midst of this chaos, OMB came out with a memo saying we are proclaiming and decreeing a funding freeze of all the federal government. So you're not allowed to make payments to any outside organization. And this caused, again, it was taken up, actually, by a federal district judge in Rhode Island. And this was Judge John McConnell. If you listen to the show regularly, you heard me talk about this. And this is now just about 7 months ago. We had him come out saying, no, this has got to be stayed. And this was the decision. It came out about St. Valentine's Day of 2025. So all of this stuff is in the service of Project 2025, which, as Steve Bannon and Kevin Roberts were chummily talking about on his show, the Second American Revolution. But, don't worry, listeners of KCAA and listeners to the podcast, it will be bloodless, just as long as the left allows it to be. Yeah, don't worry, watch your TV, eat your pizza. The bread and circuses concept of Rome, ancient Rome, is alive and well. Pana et circenses, bread and circuses. And specifically, it's the part of Project 2025 that picks up the old slogan of Bannon. It's time to dismantle and defund the administrative state. Well, in the middle of March, as we said before, Schumer and others, Schatz of Hawaii, maybe seven or eight, were willing to approve the budget. Because at this point, in the full fury of the attack, it was possible that Trump, normally, legally, and that is important to understand now, the government, the executive branch, shuts down. The Congress did not shut down. Congress, in terms of law, has separate funding, but of course, you didn't know what Trump was going to do. This is the idea of Trump. This is what makes him so dangerous. The turbulence, the uncertainty, the vagary of him. He was violating laws everywhere. It's like one of his generals said, this guy has no filter. One thought to him is the same as the other. If you're willing to say there's no such thing as birthright citizenship, which is, the 14th Amendment, I think I talked about that earlier in the show. If you're willing to say that, you're willing to do anything. There's nothing you won't try. And Trump loves this. He loves the chaos. He loves to make you afraid. He loves to hurt and make you afraid. So it was important to keep Congress in session and not leave the field to this hyper-manic phase of the Doge boys and their machinations. So I think that was correct. I think it's a mistake to think that every ultra-left is right. You'll excuse the expression. Get it? Ultra-left. Right. All right. When they say fight, fight, fight all the time. Yeah, look, be brave, okay? But pick your battles. Don't be foolhardy, okay? And that was, I think, a contribution by Schumer, all right? So the funding freeze was there. It came out of OMB by vote. And the 21st of February, then we already begin to see the flaws in all this, the weakness. And that's Bundy giving that little first interview where Bundy, now the Attorney General, says, 21st of February, I have those Epstein files on my desk for review. And she said she has the JFK files, and she has other files, and she's reviewing them, all right? And on the other side, though, the takedown, the dismantling of the federal government, the dismantling of the ability of this government to defend itself is taken down. The FBI's Foreign Influence Task Force attempts by presumably hostile nations, that's what we're talking about, hostile nations to attack the United States. I mean, I couldn't believe when Hegseth called 800 of our generals all to one place. Are you kidding me? Boy, that was a chance that was missed by some foreign nation that wanted to take out the first rank of command. Just unbelievable, the foolishness, the stupidity of this drunken game show host. Well, Fox News commentator, weekend commentator. Just unbelievable. This was the special activity of the FBI. It was shut down on the 20th of February. And then in the middle of all this hysteria, on February 28th, Trump, Vance, and Hegseth and others engineer the clash with Zelensky, that shameful charade with Zelensky in the Oval Office. Can't you just say thank you? Can't you just say thank you? Why don't you wear a suit? What the hell is wrong with you? Why don't you wear... So this is a cowardly, this is a wretched, this is a reprobate kind of ambush that they set for this gallant president of a very, very courageous country, that it deserves everything the U.S. can give and more. I mean, Mitt Romney, who I hold no brief for, none whatsoever, it gets up and says, are we crazy not to support this guy? He's fighting the Russian nation for us. We're not even losing any men. We don't have anything invested except we're, giving them the weaponry. Are we nuts? We'll do this all day long. Or, well, Trump is crazy. So this is what they did, and they wanted to show that he was a warmonger if they could, and that he had started the war. This is all ridiculous, and that he should stop it. So in other words, the flag of appeasement went up high on the flagpole. Forget about the American flag. It's the appeasement flag, the yellow flag of appeasement that went up on that day. And it's the same context a little bit earlier. In that same context, we have Trump starting to attack the various law firms that he wanted to extort, because it's all about the grift for this guy. And those were, I think it starts with Covington and Burling on the 25th of February. There are others. Covington and Burling were targeted because they cooperated with special counsel Jack Smith in the Trump prosecution. So, revenge had to be forthcoming there. And this was another turning point. And as we know, there are a number of them, some of the very biggest ones, who attempted to surrender. But you can't surrender to an utterly unprincipled force that they don't go with the Geneva Convention in these matters or the equivalent thereof. So, that was important. And the law firms that have fought back, as we know, have generally fared much better. And as ABC is now finding out, if you can pay off the protection money once, but before too long, the mafioso, the MAGA mafioso, is coming around again, and they're demanding another round of payment, and it never ends. As General MacArthur pointed out in his address to Congress, and I believe it was April of 1951, when the appeasement policies of the Truman administration required that he be removed, because he was sacked. MacArthur was sacked because he went too far, and he could have stopped that whole situation. It was like the fascist police chief who said to the police chief who said to the prime minister of Italy during the 1922 march on Rome, 5 minutes of gunfire and fascism is over. This was basically what MacArthur wanted to do, but against the belligerent and against the hostile, against North Korea, but also against China. But, Truman didn't want to do it. And we could talk a whole session about that. So at this point, let's take a break, and this is Politics by Jake, and we'll be back. And now here's a word from one of our sponsors, Twain Consulting. Hi, this is Jake with Twain Consulting. Imagine, if you will, having the power to disappear from the prying eyes of creditors, identity thieves, nosy strangers, all while protecting what you've worked so hard to build. That's what virtual invisibility offers. It's not magic. It's smart legal and business strategy to shield your assets and privacy so you can live free, confident, and in control. Most people think that asset protection is only for the ultra-wealthy, but it's for anyone who wants peace of mind and financial security, including you. Don't wait until it's too late. Take control now. Call me at 213-465-0639 or go to facebook.com/Twain Consulting to learn how virtual invisibility can protect you and your family, because when you're invisible to risk, you're unstoppable. Now let's get back to Jake and Politics by Jake. This is Jake, here to tell you the world is on fire, only you're not being told who actually lit the match. Politics by Jake, Mondays and Fridays at 7 a.m. on KCAA. Okay, this is Politics by Jake, and let's finish this up if we can. We were talking about MacArthur and the appeasement of the Truman administration. Now, as a result of all this, we've just been finishing what was the first 3 months of a 9-month stint. 13th of March, 2025, right? I don't know if that was Friday the 13th. I don't think it was. But I also call it the Ides of March, which is the 15th of March. Ides is the middle of the month. So between the 13th and the 15th of March, according to the combined Real Clear Politics average, Trump went underwater. At that point, his negatives outpaced his approval. So from that point on, this is an unpopular minority president and regime, and the disapproval outweighs and exceeds the approval. He is officially underwater. Just go to Real Clear Politics. You can take a look at that. And, of course, they've got polls in there that are essentially paid for by the MAGA society and the Republican crypto influences, or, whatever they are. But as of the 13th of March, 2025, Trump is underwater. And he hasn't come up for air ever since. And on the one hand, that's important. Here in the March phase, the beginning of the attack, it had already begun, right? The attack on Columbia University, and the fact that Columbia had this Edward Said tradition, the Orientalism issue that seemed to think was there. Columbia, weak leadership, was tending and did appease and did surrender to Trump. And part of it was that they allowed the presence of this guy Khalil and others tearing up the campus and indeed threatening Jewish students, causing public nuisance. And it was on the 19th of March that President Christopher Eisengruber of Princeton, wrote an article about the attack of the government's, or the cost of the government's attack on Columbia. American universities, he said, have given the country prosperity and security. The Trump administration's attack on religious freedom endangers all of that. And this is at the end, where he points out that the way to get out of this is vigorous, robust litigation in the federal courts to stop it. So this was already what you needed to know. And this was better than any law firm, better than Harvard, because prior to Harvard was at this point leaning towards appeasement and surrender. But we had University of Pennsylvania, they surrendered. Dartmouth hired Republican lawyers. Columbia, known by everybody. But Princeton led this fight. Something for the alumni there to be proud of. So the idea was desist Trump. 19th of March. Go back and read that. It's a very important essay. It's like a turning point. All right, so now we're done with January, February, indeed March. We have April, and you remember the 2nd of April is Liberation Day. It's Tariff Day, the day when the biggest massive tax increase on the American people ever went through, because these tariffs, listen to me, this is important. These tariffs are not paid by China. They're paid by the importers. To get that stuff out of customs, you've got to pay the duty. And then you've got to either swallow that and take that out of your workers and your dividends, or whatever else you've got, or you've got to raise prices. And remember how adamant Trump was that he wanted to intimidate Amazon and others from daring to show that prices went up because of these tariffs. Protective tariffs are a great thing in the 19th century. And they can be again. I'm not totally against tariffs. They're narrowly tailored in the 19th centuries. They're carefully tailored. Industries you want to foster and build up, like cotton, for example. Your infant industries need a protective tariff to prevent foreign dumping from strangling them in the cradle. And that's what was done. That's Abraham Lincoln specifically believed in that. Matthew Carey, Henry Carey, the whole Republican Party was protective tariff. The American system, National Bank, protective tariff. Transcontinental Railroad, protective tariff. Erie Canal, protective tariff, things of this sort. So this is all evident. And so we had this monstrous thing behind the White House where Trump came up with these crazy things where he wanted to put tariffs on uninhabited islands. This is when the stock market began to dive. Minus 10% dive in a couple of days. And it scared the hell out of Trump. And it showed once again the taco phenomenon. And this, as we mentioned before, is when Robert Armstrong of the Financial Times, it's the London newspaper, it's like the London Wall Street Journal. But in a certain sort of a way, it kind of tells the business leaders something that you really don't want to tell them. That, like, for example, you don't have to worry about him. You don't need to fight back. You don't need to counterattack because he's gonna chicken out. I think this is wrong, and you've got to know which is which. And once April had been going on, we had the hands-off demonstration. That is, once again, the 50-51 group. We had 17th of February. February had the Not My President. Now we've got the same group. Again, we're not endorsing the ideology of the various component groups, but this is a united front, and this is what it has to be right now. Okay, and I think that's where we're going to have to end the show. We'll just have to pick up with this on the next show. And this is Politics by Jake. This is the October 7th episode coming to you. And we will see you again on Saturdays at noon. And we hope you have a pleasant week and you'll come back to join us then. Bye now.